Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the founder and the host of the Rise Above Justice Movement and the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. All right. So, another addition to our candidate series. And whenever I tell you I'm excited about this one, I'm excited about this one. This one came highly recommended, as all of the candidates do. But this one, I'm going to spend a little bit more time with because I appreciate this human being. And without further ado, Audrey, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hello. So happy to be here.
You are running in Congressional District 1 in the special election. June 2nd is that special election.
Yep.
And I guess let's start off with, what led you to running for office and what is your story? you
Yeah.
know, this is the rambling part of this episode, and feel free to do so.
Thus the rambling begins. So I grew up on a family farm on the central coast of California, kind of between the Monterey, San Luis Obispo areas. We had cattle and grapes and horses, and um, I was super active in 4-H and FFA, and like I loved farming. I came up to Chico, which is in Northern California, to go to college, and I politics was never something that was ever anywhere near something that I was interested in. I mean, I watched West Wing growing up in high school, like it was when it was out, and then we'd like record it on VHS tapes so we could watch it again. But that was like the extent of my political knowledge. Um, I have spent my career teaching in higher ed at Chico State, working in international human rights, working with food banks. But in 2017, I ran for office for the first time as a response to Donald Trump is the president. What the hell timeline are we living in? And I looked around and saw so many other women in their mid 30s kind of stepping up and running for office at the first time. I was a 33-year-old teacher at the time, and I, my congressman, the late Congressman LaMalfa, didn't believe in climate change and had once said that abortions cause breast cancer. So I was like, well, hell, I'm a 33-year-old teacher, and even I would be better than this guy because I know climate change is real and about science. And so I ran when California's first was a kind of a deep ruby red district in those two cycles. And built a grassroots movement and that I'm super proud of. We were not successful in those first two runs. And then with Lord, with everything that's going on in the Trump 2.0 era, um, it felt really important to step up in this way again, um, and fight for working families. And it's so clear to me now looking at our economic and political systems that are just clearly designed to support the richest among us and corporations at our expense, that we have to elect regular working class people if we actually want to see system change happen. And so I find myself here again running my third and fourth consecutive congressional campaigns. Consecutive is the word I'm trying to say, right? If they're happening at the same time. I did that right, right? That's the
Yes.
word. Yes. Yeah, that's the word. So I'm running my third and fourth at the same time in two slightly different maps because of California's Democratic gerrymandering with Prop 50. So I've got two slightly different maps that I'm running in two elections on June 2nd. So the countdown is on. People start voting any second now. And yeah, that's my little rambling hello. Oh, I live in Chico with my two cats. I like to garden and watch birds in my spare time.
I love it. Um,
You've got about 10 years before you become a bird watcher. You think it's funny now, but if there's something that I know about you, you get sorted into hobby houses when you turn 40.
yes.
And one of them, you can basically choose between bird watching, pickleball, and crafts. And I'm going to bet you're going to go with bird watching. It's great.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Um, you know, I also love nature. I love being outside. I
Right.
become quite the homebody, and and I think the older I get, the less I want to be like out and about amongst people. I would rather sit in my room and interview people for a podcast.
Preach. That's
I
I'm
mean,
also getting more introverted, which is a little bit problematic with also running
yes,
for office because those two things don't always go hand in hand. But
yes.
it does make me really enjoy my solitary bird watching time even more. So
hmm I yes, 100%. I get it entirely. So diving in, a little bit into your platform, the first thing whenever you go to audreyforcongress.com/issues, and I'm saying that so that people go on and actually look at the platform. The first thing that's on here, is getting big money out of politics. So as I've said with every candidate that I have interviewed, and by this point I've interviewed dozens, okay?
mhm.
But grassroots, what does the grassroots actually look like? Well, it means you don't take PAC money. It
Mhm.
means you don't take corporation money,
Mhm.
unlike some politicians.
Yep.
I can name quite a few of them. One of them is on a book tour right now, and he's a U.S. senator out of New Jersey.
Mhm.
Um, I think we all know who I'm talking about, aka Cory Book Tour. Um, but we think about that court ruling of Citizens United in 2010. The Supreme Court ruled that corporations and money is free speech.
Mhm.
What in the actual fuck?
Yep.
That's the only, at that time I didn't know anything about politics. I was like, oh, I'm never going to get into politics. I don't give a fuck
Yeah.
about it. And then I realized, like, oh, they're coming after disabled people. They're coming
Mhm.
after LGBTQ people. They're coming after, women, which I was
Mhm.
raised by my mom and my grandmother. And, I had an alcoholic stepfather. Um, but he wasn't really present. I didn't learn anything from him. I learned everything from my mom and my grandma because, my
Yeah.
grandmother was Native American.
Mhm.
And she was a huge feminist. My
Mhm.
grandfather was a union organizer and an Air Force veteran. They were also staunch Democrats.
Yeah.
And I learned the Democratic values.
Mhm.
And the Democratic Party now is not something that I recognize.
No.
I do not recognize it. And it's not what my grandpa recognized. He passed away in 2020, but he was so utterly pissed
Yeah.
about Trump getting elected in 2016. And he was livid. He said,
Mhm.
"This is not the country that I busted my ass off to serve."
Yep.
And he said, "This is not the country that I grew up in." And I told him, I said, "Grandpa, it actually is. Because
Yeah.
these issues have been going on for decades." He said,
Yeah.
"You know what? You're right." And anyway, so Citizens United 2010, it gave corporations and it gave big money a voice in Congress and in
Mhm.
elections. Because it's not just in Congress, it also trickles down to the state legislatures. It
Mhm.
trickles down to your city council because there's still this influence in policy. And it literally is a policy choice. We can overturn Citizens United if they actually wanted to do it. But to you, you've pledged never to accept corporate PAC contributions.
Yep.
What does that mean? What does that look like? And
Yeah.
why do more candidates need to be grassroots?
Every single candidate should be grassroots. Like, let's start there and let's say, like, Citizens United should be overturned with a constitutional amendment. We
Mm-hmm.
should pass the Disclose Act to expose, like, where dark money is coming from and the shell companies. We should pass, like, the Ban Corporate PACs Act to make sure that for-profit corporations aren't like to stop for-profit corporations from funding political campaigns and influencing elections. Like we should have public financing. We should have small dollar matching programs. We should have election cycles that aren't 2 years so working class people can actually run. Like there are so many things that we can do to try to end the chokehold, the grip that big money has on our elections, but we can't do any of those until we get enough people, enough of a voting bloc elected um, that has some sort of political courage and spine that can say, oh, I can actually stand up on my own 2 feet and fight for real people and only take money from real people and raise enough money to mount a competitive campaign. And that's the thing that, like, I feel like the Democratic Party, the establishment corporate captured section of the Democratic Party, which feels like all of the power brokers primarily, um, I don't think that they actually trust real people and voters enough.
Mhm.
Because like when like I've raised almost or I raised over $800,000 this cycle with an average contribution size of $51. Like, and I'm running in a dem on dem primary, right? Like my 2 cycles when it was an R10 and an R14 district that I ran in before, those 2 cycles I raised $3.5 million with an average contribution size of $47, mostly from people who lived within the district. And so like, and it's because I not only like show up and cast a vision for like what I believe that representation looks like and what leadership looks like, but then I trust people to be in this journey with me and they trust me to represent them. And so um it's this relational trust fundraising that is
Mhm.
just completely different than corporate PAC money. And like honestly, like also like in 18 and 20, I never had to say no to money. Like traditionally, like corporate PAC money is not going to come to a challenger candidate. Like they're gonna once you're an incumbent or once you're coming up from state legislative office, like that's when corporations are going to start offering you PAC checks. But like so 2018 and 2020 wasn't hard. This cycle was the first cycle that I had to like actually turn money down and be like, oh, thank you so much for wanting to give that to me. I would love to know like your opinions on the issues, but I'm not actually going to take your money because I don't take corporate PAC money. Or I actually don't take Israel lobby money or Israel lobby adjacent money or APAC money. So like, thank you, but no thank you. So this is like, would it be a hell of a lot easier if I would take $10,000 pack checks at a time? Yeah, that's a lot easier than spending 40 hours a week asking people for $30 at a time during call time. But like, that's
But
not
do you
the kind of
let me
candidate I am. So,
let me ask you this. Do you feel that how how would I word this? I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this because we see this influence of money in politics. And then, like you just said, would it be easier? And literally asking that question is exactly why we need the grassroots and why we need to get money out of politics.
yeah.
That exact statement of what you just said is exactly why. Would it be easier? It should not cost, I have talked, let me tell you this. Let me backtrack.
Hmm.
Some of the candidates that I've talked to, they were told by their state party, oh, you're going to have to raise $500,000. You're going to have to raise $1 million in order to even like make a thing or, even like make the ballot. And it's like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous that progressive voices have to fight this hard just to be seen. The corporate and mainstream media has not amplified a lot of these, these campaigns.
Mhm.
It's we talk about money in politics. We also have money in media.
Mhm. Yeah.
And there's money in literally everything. See a common denominator, it's the fucking money.
Yeah. And
We'll dive into gun violence here in a minute, but
yeah.
it kind of ties into that too, because you also have the NRA influence too.
Yeah.
But thinking about, you know, what would it look like? What you know what? Here, let me ask this question. What has been your experience with running for office, not just this time, but I think you said this is number 4, right?
3 and 4.
3 and 4. That's so confusing.
I know. I'm
But
confused and I'm the one doing it. So there you go.
what are some of the similarities you're seeing, and what are some of the differences running now versus then?
Hmm.
And I'm just curious about that. And then I have another question too after we get this one done.
Yeah. It's what's really interesting is people's relationship with political giving changes. And it's also like really person specific. Like there are I have been a bridesmaid 17 times. So there are literally women who I have been a bridesmaid in their wedding who have not ever donated $50 to a congressional campaign of mine, right? And yet there are people who um, one person I'm thinking of specifically, like in my 2018 campaign, like sold their Nike Air Jordans so they could make a political contribution to me. Like there is like strangers that will give you everything that they have, and there are people that you've known for your whole life that won't donate at all. And so it's really the thing I think that's the common through thread for me about like trying to raise grassroots money is that um, it's not actually about me ever. It's about like whether or not someone will donate is about their own relationship with money. And what I've seen really interestingly this cycle is that the richest people right now are boy, are they locked down. Like the poor people, like, and though myself included, right? Like the working class people who are just trying to make it, we're generally speaking so much more generous than like the wealthy elite class with which is kind of interesting to me, but I guess yeah, so I don't know, that's some things that I've seen in terms of like what's been same or different about the grassroots fundraising, but was that the question? I'm sorry. We
No,
both
it
that we have
does.
ADHD, and I'm
And
like, was that what we were talking about? I forgot.
you're completely fine. Let's dive in and yes, it did answer the question. Let's talk about forest health and fire prevention. So California is no stranger to whenever it comes to, wildfires. And there was a really devastating fire that took place, was it last year or the year before?
We
Like
have them every year. Which one?
like
Which one are we?
the ones that kind of like ripple through like LA and
Oh
like,
yeah, 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 yeah. Those ones are
which I
really bad.
know wasn't necessarily, wildfires per se,
No, no, they were. Yeah,
but it's kind of, yeah, there's a lot that took place, right? So
yeah.
thinking about wildfires in California, what are some of those preventative measures that California could take and then also just the country could take
Hmm.
to, prevent this?
Yeah.
Like
I,
there's a lot.
there's a lot. So I think like it's really important to ground ourselves in like what are making these wildfires worse. And so they're today these fires they're bigger, they're hotter, and they're more destructive because three different factors are working together to amplify them. And those factors are climate change, decades and decades of mismanaged forests and a fire suppression policy, and then corporate negligence, like with the Camp Fire in
Mhm.
2018 that took out Paradise in most of the county where I live in, and we lost 84 lives. That was caused because of PG&E, our utility providers' negligence in terms of maintaining um, equipment. So we and climate change is exacerbating these fires, but also then these fires are making climate change worse because they're emitting so much CO2 with the smoke. So um, knowing that climate change is drying out fuels, lengthening these fire seasons. Our forests are dangerously overgrown. And then some of these like wildfires are not actually natural forest fires. They're human caused by human intervention. Like having those three pieces in the puzzle is really important to recognize because in Congress I can actually take action on all three of those forces. So um,
Mhm.
for me, like I want to sit on the agriculture committee. I want to sit on the natural resources committee. The ag committee has the U.S. Forest Service budget, staffing levels, but also controls and can influence some of the policy that'll make it easier for Forest Service to work with some of our external partners like resource conservation districts, like fire safe councils, our tribes, and local contractors who are actually doing the work. Quick example, um, there is a 20,000 acre landscape level forest restoration project that's happening in the Lassen and Plumas National Forest. So this is 20,000 acres in the scope of like a forest restoration project. It's huge. Like normally people are treating like 100, maybe 200 acres at a time. They're these small patchwork projects, but in order to like approach this problem at the pace and the scale that we need to have these massive like 20,000 acre projects. And so this project was spearheaded by the Butte County Resource Conservation District that's sitting on $31 million of PG&E settlement money from the Camp Fire. And so they were the ones who actually brought together all of the stakeholders to get the NEPA documentation through. It was a $1.3 million planning process that they had to go to with Forest Service to get the NEPA approved. Um, but they were kind of the collaborating entity. And so I was sitting down with them and I was like, what is the number one thing that I can do as your member of Congress to make it easier for you guys to do this work at a pace and a scale that will actually make a meaningful difference in this problem? And they're like, we just need you to make it easier for us to do this partnership with Forest Service. Like, that's the number one thing that they wanted. And so making sure that the system is in place for these entities to be able to gather and to do that work is so important. And we can talk more about, I mean, this is something that I can get really in the weeds of really quickly. But so I'm trying very hard not to make that happen. But that is just an absolute huge part of what I'm fighting for. And it connects to rural economic security. It connects to climate change. It connects to wildfire insurance. And it's all in there. So I'm going to stop talking and let you tease the direction that you'd like to keep me going down.
It's also science-based fire prevention, which your website literally lays out. And some of the proposals and the priorities that you're focusing on in forestry and prevention is support science-based fire prevention, including field breaks, controlled burns, strategic thinning, promote selective, sustainable logging to reduce overgrowth. Yes, 100%. And Audrey, let me tell you this: you would think this would be common sense, right?
You really would.
But unfortunately it's not for a lot of people. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like whenever you invest in economies, it's like they thrive, right?
Mhm.
And it is common sense. It really is. But kind of thinking about this, how do you feel about the what's happening with like the national forest? And not just in like California, but just like across the country. Like they're chopping down a lot of these forests. They're building like these AI freaking data centers,
Yeah.
and they're doing like all this weird shit, needless to say. And they're gutting a lot of the national forests. Like they did whenever Trump first took office, they ran like unhoused people out of the forest. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, no.
Oh Lord. That was like, let me I'm gonna edit this part out, don't worry. But there was a part whenever he first took office. One second. As of May 2025, the U.S. Forest Service had initiated major large-scale evictions of unhoused individuals living in national forests, most notably in Oregon. And that took
Oh,
place on May 1st, 2025. They forced approximately 150 people to leave a long-term encampment known as China Hat along China
hmm.
Hat Road near Bend in Oregon.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that we're seeing the Trump administration push through, like are things like permanent emergency authorizations, which basically just allows entities to bypass NEPA or um, these other kind of categorical exclusions they're called, which um, Trump is famous for just kind of like opening the floodgates of everything, and instead of like we're like I think when Elon Musk came in with Doge, like before that, everybody was like, yeah, there's probably some waste in the federal government. The federal government could probably be more efficient at what they're doing. That's not some big news, right? Like, but
Mhm.
the way that they went about doing it didn't actually cut out waste. It actually just made us lose institutional knowledge, made us lose like long-term tenured employees who should have been like training the next generation in Forest Service and in these other programs. And then like it what's like there's an example that comes through from NRCS, which is the Natural Resource Conservation Service. It's part of USDA. Like in California, the Doge cuts like affected their staffing levels. So they lost a bunch of their scientists that would approve and administer projects, but it didn't change the amount, the budget line item of projects that they need to get through. So now it's less scientists having to quote unquote spend the same amount of money on projects, but now they don't have the staff time to be able to adequately like vet and design the projects. And so then they're having to put things out into the world that they're like, this may or may not work, but we don't know because we have to get this money out the door. And so I'm like, so by trying to make it more efficient and effective, you actually made it the complete opposite. Made it way less effective, way less efficient because they cut with this chainsaw hatchet instead of actually trying to do like outcomes based policy work.
Gee, it's like the budget cuts probably shouldn't have actually happened because like you said, the budgets and the cuts to the budgets. Wow, it has been a long day, y'all. It's been a long week. It's been a long
It's
year. It's
it's
been a
been a
long
long
like.
timeline. We're not even really sure where we are, but we don't like it here.
All right, let me try to get my thoughts together here. I know what I want to say, it's just not coming to me. But gee, it's like these cuts to these budgets were disastrous. And it's like, this is exactly what they set out to do. This is why you do not have a billionaire making cuts to crucial programs. And I guess he's not necessarily a billionaire now, he's a trillionaire. But we
Oh, God.
saw, let me say this about Mr. Elon Musk. We see what he's doing on Twitter slash X. Why in the fuck would you allow him near our government and
Right?
near our data? Stealing people's social security numbers and is literally stealing because he defied court orders to stop doing it and he did not listen. And oh, I can continue popping off. I used to be an avid Twitter like X user. I had thousands of followers. He took over the platform. And I'm like, fucking, I'm out.
Yeah.
I am not going to be a part of that. Unfortunately, the biggest following that we do have is on Instagram. It's close to 400,000 followers, but it's still a part of these meta censorship platforms. And
Mhm.
I can post an image of like a news article, okay, and we tend to get a lot of traction, right? But whenever we post about our podcast or we post about, God forbid somebody needs like mutual aid to keep their
Mhm.
housing because, the government's not doing its job, um, it barely gets any traction at all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we're stuck in this limbo of this oligarchy, the
Hmm.
patriarchy, and we're stuck in this. And I say that as a male voice, right? Because we do not. Oh my god, I'm just rambling, but
Hmm.
it's all connected and it's all by design. These politicians that we have right now, they are literally fascists wrapped in red, white, and blue, and call themselves a Christian.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
But shifting and let's talk about some rural healthcare and let's talk about rural health in general. So we're seeing these AI data centers pop up in rural communities that are
Mhm.
already riddled in poverty. They, a lot of marginalized communities, black and brown communities, indigenous communities live in these areas that these AI data centers are popping up, and it's taking away a lot of resources. It's polluting the air, it's taking the water, it's doing a lot of this. What are some of the concerns that you're hearing from like, do you have any, you have some rural parts in your district, right?
Yeah,
It's
most of
most
the
of it, isn't
part,
it?
yeah, the most of the part of the world where I'm running in is really, really rural. Also remote rural and like frontier-esque in some of these places. Like when you look at California on a map, I'm running
Mhm.
to represent most of the northeast corner of the state. And so there's, two counties that I'm running to represent where women can't deliver babies um, in the hospital facilities because there's not an anesthesiologist on staff. And so they actually have to drive hours and hours when they're in labor to be able to get to a place where they can deliver a baby. We lost Glenn County, which is kind of in the North Valley. It's the next door county to where I live. We lost the only hospital in that county last October. It lost its critical access designation because it was half of a mile too close to the neighboring hospital. And so then when it shut down, we lost overnight those 150 jobs, but also there's two ambulances in the county that can take people out of the county now to get services. And so people will actually die waiting for care or trying to access care. And then, should they be able to actually get to another hospital, that then impacts the already impacted system that we had in those two counties, right? And so, like, the challenges of rural healthcare will never go away. Like, the only solution to rural healthcare access is a single payer nonprofit healthcare system, um, because profit driven systems fail in rural parts of the world because there is not enough there's not enough people out here to to justify the number of care, right? So like they for-profit models can't sustain that low volume. And so as long as between 15 and 18% of every healthcare dollar is going to line insurance company pockets instead of actually pay providers and pay for care, then we're going to continue to be tanked out here. And like and it's getting worse every single day. And so and then when we're looking at the effects of the one big beautiful bill and what this administration has done to cutting Medicare and Medicaid and um, like rural hospital funding just through that one act, like we're this is we're in dire straits out here, and we absolutely need we need a single payer system. We need it now. But it's going to take a hot second, going back to money in politics and the systems working as they're designed by the people who are bought and paid for by insurance companies. Like that's we got to get people elected that won't take that money.
Mhm. Exactly. And I think about progressive voices across the country. One of them we collaborate with quite a bit, which is Corey Bush out of Missouri District 1,
Hmm.
which I grew up in Missouri District 5. So my representative for literally a majority of my life was Representative Emmanuel Cleaver. But I moved across the state line to Kansas, and I'll be voting my first Kansas election this year. And I'm voting against the current incumbent because she is an Apex shill.
Hmm.
Um, and Sarah Prue,
I
yes, literally, Sarah Prue is running a very grassroots campaign. You have a lot of similar things that you talk about. So it's actually really exciting to see. But I feel a sense of hope. I feel a sense of urgency to fight to preserve democracy. And I feel a sense of hope that we're going to be okay.
yeah.
And what I mean by that is, times feel that this timeline is not one that I've ever lived through. This is definitely a wild timeline. You see children being kidnapped off the streets and sent to these concentration camps. I refuse to call it a detention center because that's not what it is. I do not see it as that. It is a part of a system
Same.
that still perpetuates violence against marginalized communities. Gee, it's like the systems were not set up to benefit you or me or any of our black and brown neighbors or literally anybody except for the wealthy and these ginormous corporations, which Core Civic runs around very rapidly. They own a lot of these concentration camps and they run them like literally like concentration camps. There's no
Yeah.
better way to explain it.
Yeah.
And, they do process, and we're going to dive into ICE and DHS here in just a second. I want to get your thoughts on this. It's kind of like a perfect segue and it goes right into it. And speaking of money and politics, this also plays a key role in that too. Um, thinking about the current state of DHS and ICE, if you're older than 2003, you are older than DHS.
Yep.
DHS was created out of alleged fear after
Mhm.
9/11. And I say alleged because there is no evidence to back up that fear.
Mhm.
Um, but thinking about the current state of DHS and ICE and, Border Patrol and all this, what are your thoughts as far as what you're seeing across California? I know we've all been watching Los Angeles. It has been horrific
Mhm.
watching, but seeing the community rise up and fight back, I think that has been the best part of all of it because
Mhm.
California is not having it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of elections going on. There's progressive voices all across the state of California, but in regards to your reactions of ICE and DHS, I mean, we all watched Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. We watched Alex Preddy, Keith Porter, I believe in California,
Mhm.
um, which was also horrific. But what are your thoughts on ICE and DHS, and what have
Yeah.
you seen
I
as
mean,
far as things going on?
I'm just in lockstep with you in terms of the fact that like ICE has to be abolished. Like these are
Mm-hmm.
concentration camps. Like this is the second time today that I've said that in an interview. Like uh it's it's like we watched them murder citizens in the street. We watched them, right? Like, and what we're not seeing is what's happening behind the walls of the concentration camps. But we
Mm-hmm.
know that people are getting raped, that people are getting murdered, that people are dying without health care, that there's no like civil rights or civil liberties or like even basic human dignity provided to any people in these in their under their jurisdiction. And so like ICE has become Donald Trump's private police force, and once a enforcement agency, quote unquote, gets so out of whack with its mandate and like literally zero accountability, it just there's no way that you can reform that agency anymore. Like we don't also just democracies don't deploy masked agents to destabilize civilian communities. Like that's just not what democracies do. That's what authoritarian systems do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like Congress has to use every tool, funding, statutory change, structural dismantling to shut down what is a militarized interior deportation force, right? So that's just the very base of it. But for me, like the conversation that we're not having when we talk about this is like also Donald Trump is a racist who intentionally is defunding the asylum system and asylum courts and removing judges and cutting down on lawyers and it's and making the entire process more cruel than it should be, right? Like I was the president of the board of a human rights organization that works in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. We've been around for 25 years. I lived in El Salvador for a year after my undergrad, and that our organization has walked alongside victims of state violence and gang violence and people looking for economic opportunity and people fleeing climate crisis. And like what we're not talking about enough, in my opinion, is like we're not recognizing the United
Mm-hmm.
States' culpability in what got Central America and Mexico to the places that they are now. Like, we're not looking at our foreign policy from the 80s and saying, like, oh, our bad. Like, we actually contributed to destabilizing all of these entities. Maybe we should do more root cause work. Instead, our racist war criminal rapist president dismantled USAID, right? Which was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, really important to me that we like not only just talk about like the fact that we have to abolish ICE, but also the fact that we need to do more. Like we need to rebuild the asylum system. We need to rebuild USAID. We need to rebuild and imagine like what an immigration system can look like when it actually centers the cultural and economic and social benefit that immigrants bring to our country and to our lives and our communities. You know, it's just it's we're not doing enough.
Hmm. I'm glad you mentioned about US aid. You know, there is a group of former federal workers that
Hmm.
is on social media, and they are at Friends of US Aid.
Hmm.
And we as a movement collaborate with them. You used to be pretty regularly. They've been kind of, focused on what's going on in Minneapolis, and they've been amplifying things that are going across. But I'm a big supporter of US aid. I have always been a fan of them. I'm also a
Hmm.
big fan of just the people that were a part of it, and they were all doged. And they
Yeah.
kept certain parts of US aid, but it is the horrific parts of it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And, they used to do like a lot of HIV and AIDS advocacy, like
Yep.
across the world. Those were cut,
Yep.
which we're seeing astronomically, which is a genocide in itself.
Hmm.
Um, and it leads into a lot of the next administration is going
Hmm.
to have a lot to go back through and undo if there
Hmm.
is anything to undo, or we're going to have to rebuild those systems. Like you said, rebuild the asylum system. Absolutely. Um, our immigrant communities have been denied the right to due process.
Yeah.
Due process applies to everybody. And in fact, and there, anybody can go and find this out, but due process is so important that it appears in the Constitution more than once.
Hmm.
Like it's talked about in the Fifth and the 14th Amendment. That's how important due process is. And
Yep.
whenever you are taking people off the streets and you're literally kidnapping them, and that's practically what it is, because a deportation without the right to due process is literally a government sanctioned kidnapping
Yeah.
to the freaking T by definition. And cruelty is the point.
Yes.
Cruelty is the point. We need to drill that into voters' minds because they need to understand that if you put these people in power, they're going to continue doing this disastrous bullshit and ripping communities apart.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
And
oh,
I
go ahead.
just I just want to I want to elevate something that you just said that I think is so key, and that's like when we're whoever this next administration is, like in
Oh,
this post-Trump era, like we have to have not only the administration, but I believe that we have to have progressive leaders in place and
yes.
ready in Congress. And not only progressive leaders, but progressive leaders that are actually representative of the communities that they serve. Because in
Mhm.
order to create, like, because we can't just fucking rebuild what we've had, right? Because like
No.
all of our democratic institutions and systems have been based on 250 years of structural racism, the patriarchy, misogyny, bigotry, like and the output of them have been systems that benefit corporations and the richest, right? So in this like next chapter in this post-Trump era of our democracy, like in order to actually center real people at the center of our democracy, we have to have an administration um th that can like dream that big, but then we have to have a House of Representatives that has more women and more queer people and more people of color and more working class people, and younger people for crying out loud that actually have enough like lived experience with the issues that we're facing to be able to say like this is how systems serve people. And that's what I want to be a part of. Like that's the work for me is building the table big enough that we have enough voices at it that we can co-create and imagine what this next phase is. Like, yeah, we've got 2.5 more years of trying to stop Trump from doing all of his Trump things. But like after that, like this is like things are gonna get worse, but in the bottom, in the darkest pile of the worstness that stuff gets in this Trump era, that is where there's actually potential for system change. And like that's where there's like
Mhm.
potential for these bold new like not only just progressive policies, but actually systems that center people. And so that I don't know, that's kind of my hope in this whole thing.
In a way, I am upset about the way that things have taken place because Americans are feeling the absolute effects of these systems being dismantled. Like we're feeling it, right?
Mhm.
But on the other hand, it's like maybe this could be, maybe I'm just maybe I'm just being too optimistic, but I also feel that we could build these systems back in the way that they're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
am I being too optimistic here? Because it does take getting the people who actually give a damn about this country because we love this country, okay? Or you
Yeah.
wouldn't be running for office because
Right.
it's one of those things like, well, and I guess I can't. Well, okay, but specifically, you and some of the other candidates that I've interviewed love this country because it's very
Yeah.
obvious that some do not, even though
Yeah.
they claim they do, but they only love the certain parts of it. They don't love what actually makes America great, and it's our immigrant communities, it's our disabled communities. You know, the people that they're attacking the most,
Mhm.
and I feel like we can build these systems back in a way that they're supposed to be for the people, by the people, and they'll be stronger than ever. Maybe I'm just, like I said, maybe I'm just being too optimistic here, but I do feel a sense of hope in a weird kind of way. Um,
And if we didn't feel that hope, we wouldn't be doing this work, right? Like you wouldn't be effective at your job or like doing it if you're
mhm,
like, "Oh, we're all just toast," right? And I wouldn't still be trying to do this if I didn't believe that like we the people could actually make the changes to make our democracy center people again, right? And so
mhm.
um I think we are just, being 50% of the people on this call. Like I think that we are equally clear-eyed about like the challenges and what is happening, balanced with enough of a dash of hope to make us continue to keep fighting this fight, right? Like, and there's something that I learned from my human rights work that I think is just so applicable to this, and it's this like we don't do human rights work thinking that there's going to be no more human rights violations in our lifetimes, right? Like we do human rights work because it is in the fighting for human rights that we find our purpose and our meaning, and it is in the struggle for human rights that we ground ourselves in what is true about the world, which is our shared common dignity and humanity, right? And it's for me, it's the same thing of as like fighting for our democracy. Like we're this year our democracy backslid from like number 24 to number 38 and like the healthy democracy list globally, right? Like so we're not fighting for democracy thinking that we're going to become the healthiest democracy in the world again. Like we're fighting because we love our country, and it's because in fighting for it, that's where we find meaning and purpose in this life, right? And so I don't that's my I'm trying not to end sentences with I don't know, even though that's because I do know, which is why I said the thing that I said. But then as a space filler, I end with I don't know. But so I'm working on that. That's my verbal tick I'm trying to adjust. In case the audience was curious about my personal and professional growth.
I love it. We're learning together. I love this. My next thing that I wanted to, I know we're coming up on time here, and I know it feels like we just began, but um, well, we kind of talked before this too, but um, thinking about gun violence. Okay, so my grandfather was a gun owner, like
Mhm.
practically his entire life. He was a gun owner, but he kept them locked up. He kept them, out of touch or, out of range for like his grandchildren to touch. Like I honestly don't even know where the hell he kept them. My mom's like, yeah, they're downstairs and they're in this, that, and I'm like, I don't fucking care. Like, I'm just glad they're locked up, right? Because we have some. Well, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole different topic. But anyway, um, background checks on all gun sales, on ammo sales, because you can walk into a pawn shop in some places of the country and you don't even need, they don't run background checks. You
Yep.
can also go to these gun shows and get them.
Yep.
You can go out and then we also have these things called ghost guns that are untraceable because they don't have a
Yep.
serial number and you can
And
assemble them yourself,
yep, you can 3D print them.
which is insane to me.
Yep.
But thinking about, gun violence,
Yeah.
because California is no stranger to gun violence.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
unfortunately, it's all across the country. I mean, we saw what just happened in Louisiana
Yeah.
during a domestic violence dispute.
Yeah.
And, 8 children shot and killed.
So horrific. Yeah, it's the leading cause of death for children and teens in the
Mhm.
United States, surpassing car accidents, right? More than 40,000 Americans die every year to gun violence. Many of those enabled by these loopholes that we're talking about, right? So like,
Mhm.
and this crisis isn't being driven by responsible gun owners. It's being driven by Congress's inability to stand up to the gun lobby, right? And so let's just name that really clearly. Because if Congress could stand up to the gun lobby, they would have already enacted universal background checks with no exceptions, no gun show loophole. They would have already banned bump stocks and binary triggers that turn firearms into weapons of mass destruction. They would have caught like banned ghost guns. They would have already reinstated the assault weapons ban. They would have like expanded gun violence protection orders so, families can act before tragedy strikes. And like we would have already invested in community-based violence prevention, safe storage education, like the things that we know that actually save lives. Like, I mean, I told you I grew up on a farm and ranch. Like, I'm a gun owner. I have 2 guns locked in the gun safe in my basement. That, should I go back out to someone's ranch and want to, that's what they're there for. One is a rifle and one is like my dad's service weapon from Vietnam. That's like a historical, whatever, but it's locked in the gun safe where it should be. And so that was like part of the culture that I grew up in on the ranch. But like my dad, the, 78-year-old disabled Vietnam vet, like he wasn't and still is like super serious about like gun safety and like it was like and making sure that like yeah like this is how you responsibly use a firearm, this is what a firearm is used for, like this is like why it's important in our context, but like here's how to be safe about it. And so like I just like the fact that we're where we are with this crisis in America and the fact that every single time something horrific happens, um, members of Congress react with thoughts and prayers instead of actually doing their goddamn job, um, is just infuriating.
What is that job? It's obviously representing the people, but it's obvious that the current leadership is not doing so. And not even just it trickles down. And it's not just the leadership. There's also several Congress members that are bought and paid for, and they need to get the fuck out. And that is the people's house. Okay. And I think that's something that people forget about whenever they become elected officials. Your inaction is like worse than literally anything that you could ever do. Like your silence. And gun violence is a policy choice. It is a systemic failure of our country. And we are setting generations up to come for failure.
Yeah,
They're going up around war.
yeah,
They're growing up around genocide in Gaza and Sudan and Congo.
yes,
And not even just there, it goes even on
yeah.
beyond that. And we see what's happening with funding illegal wars. I mean, for God's sakes, Audrey, the fucking Pentagon is using AI. Like,
Yeah.
what in the actual fuck are
Yeah.
we
We're-
doing?
It's just toast. It's just, hey, can I just lift up something else that you just said that I'm just so pleased about? I mean, okay, so this is where my human rights brain gets a little wonky because I almost said that I was pleased about, I'm so pleased that you lifted up and elevated other genocides that are going on around in the world because obviously what is happening, what Israel is doing in Gaza is a genocide. Um, and yet there are other genocides happening around the world as well that we just in like 2 that you mentioned in Sudan and in
We've
Congo.
neglected.
We neglect and we just don't freaking talk about anything that happens on the continent of Africa because of the structural and systemic racism that is in the news media, along with all of our other systems, right? And so, like, I just my middle sister lived in Liberia for 2 years, and she lived in South Sudan for 5 years. I lived in Ghana for a year. I spent time with her in when she was in Sudan, South Sudan. we were actually there when they made when South Sudan became its own country, when the referendum vote
Mm.
happened.
Hmm.
But like it matters so like my core belief is that all humans are inherently equal in worth and rights and dignity, and that's my human rights framing. But that's like for me that part of my soul gets really triggered and upset when we just neglect an entire continent out of the discussion in the news media. So thank you for saying that. That meant a lot to me. So.
One of the groups that we collaborate with on quite a bit is Team Congo,
Mhm.
and they're on Instagram and like social media, and I highly recommend anybody following them and keeping up with the work that they are doing because they're organizing to end this genocide in Congo and
Mhm.
also recognizing, the Palestinian people, they're recognizing the Sudanese people. Like they are doing some very deep, empowering work, and they are some incredible human beings. And my heart shatters every time I receive a collaboration request from them because it's like they're still having to do this and they shouldn't have to do it alone. And this is not who we are. We are Benjamin Netanyahu's puppet, and Benjamin Netanyahu does not represent people. He's yeah, oh God. This gets so ugly and I'm called anti-Semitic. And I have a um you could call out a genocide, and the state of in which people are on social media, it's deeply alarming that people don't understand what's actually happening. And if they do understand it, they refuse to look at it and see it exactly what it is. A genocide is a genocide. The mass extinction of people is a genocide. Forcibly starving them is a
Yeah.
genocide. The lack of healthcare, the lack of water, the lack of food, the lack of empathy is a genocide.
The intentional destruction of civilian lives, right? Like that's like, and that's, I mean, this is not, for me, it's not even up for debate. Like after the
No.
United Nations Human Rights Council says like this is what it is, that's what it is. But like the other part that I think is that's kind of baffling to me is that while saying that, we can also hold like the rise of anti-Semitism is
Mm-hmm.
horrific and shouldn't be happening. And Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. Donald Trump is a war criminal, but their collective state actions like don't reflect then on anything on the worth or dignity of Israeli citizens or Jewish Americans or anyone else. Like those reflect on the state actions of the state of Israel and the state of the United States. Like for me, like um, that part is so clear in my brain that those things are separate. But it is not, but it is more nuanced than that for a lot of other people. And so that's, I mean, that's my perspective. That's what I believe, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just it's interesting that that's I don't know. It's not
Mm-hmm.
so.
Exactly. I want to say thank you for having this conversation with me, first of all. And then secondly, just bringing your whole badassery to this
Mm,
entire like progressive wave. We hear a lot about the blue wave, but I'm seeing a progressive wave, and it's giving me a lot of, like I said, a lot of hope, but also a lot of like different emotions and different feelings because it's like a better America is possible. And
yeah.
it begins with us, it begins with the people because we, the people, have the power. And whenever we hear we, the people, and it's connected to the US Constitution, it's typically from, again, like those people that, like I said, are, they're fascists, they're wrapped in red, white, and
Yeah.
blue, and they call themselves a Christian. That is not the Christian core beliefs and the Christian values. I consider myself to be a progressive Christian myself,
Yeah.
and I don't get deep into religion because I've always been a little wonky whenever it comes
Hmm.
to like organized religion.
Hmm.
And I just believe that people, deserve the dignity they believe, or, I believe that people deserve protection I believe people deserve to live their lives and love who they want and be who they want to be and just mind your own goddamn business. It's really not that hard.
Yeah. And also
Like,
all of the things that you just listed off are consistent with the actual teachings of Jesus. Like so like
yes.
there's also that bit like
And
this
you know
is kind
what?
of this is a fun fact about me, but my mom, my stepdad, and both of my sisters are all Episcopalian clergy. So we have like there's four masters of divinity in my immediate family, and so we have a lot of dinner table conversations about this. And they're all, progressive Democrats who love Jesus and love people and love talking about that. And I'm kind of more in your lane with organized religion. But it's really part of like who I am and why I do this work. But it is interesting that like I keep saying the word interesting when interesting is a euphemism for completely fucked up. Of like, it's interesting. Nope. What I meant was, well, that's completely fucked up. But the yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective that you brought. And um, I appreciate that you have created a space with this podcast where people can bring their whole selves and their authenticity to these issues in your platform. I think as part of this progressive wave that you're talking about, like I think the superpower of um, your generation and my generation is going to be like leading with our whole
Woof.
selves, right? And leading with that authenticity and that vulnerability. And the more that we can um and like show what that looks like in public spaces like this, the more other people feel like they have permission to bring their whole selves to whatever organizing work or work or whatever it is that people are doing. I think the more that we can lead with our authenticity and vulnerability and whole selves, the better leaders we are. So
Lord have mercy whenever I say that these generations, whenever we take power,
right.
I feel and I feel yeah. I'm talking like saying it out loud puts it into perspective,
Yeah.
and I'm putting it into the world that if you're thinking about running for office, you need to run like Audrey.
Mhm.
Um, and you need to, God, I need you to come to California, or I need you to come, damn it, you are in California. I need you to come to Kansas and bring some of that empathy here because it's very obvious that a lot of our elected officials here in Kansas do not give a single fuck.
Yeah.
And it's not just in Kansas. I pick on Kansas because I'm in Kansas, but it's also Missouri. It's also Texas. It's
Mhm.
also even like some of the blue states, like Minnesota and New York. There's still loopholes in these laws that people don't recognize, and it is still fucked up. But how can people contribute to your campaign, and how can they uplift the work that you are doing?
Yes. Audreyforcongress.com is the website. That's also the social media handle. And we're in the final like ground game. Like we're doing phone banking, we're doing calling, texting. If anybody happens to live out here, we're doing doors. But mostly like we would love anybody who wanted to plug into any of our volunteer efforts to help us out in that way. And then there's a donate link also on the website. Every honest to God, every single dollar um, counts at this and helps get us to where we need to be able to get the message out. I the budget for the whole campaign, like just to kind of close the circle back to the starting and ending with money in politics, like the budget for a competitive congressional primary in my part of the world is $1 million, right? And so I've raised more than 800. Like I'm almost there to raise the budget that we need. But like just the fact that like to run a like competitive Democratic primary, like I have to find $1 million. Like that part is bonkers to me. Because to your point, like I have a leg up because I've been able to build a donor base over the years and like I've been able to try to build this momentum and this movement. Um, and I'm so lucky because of that. But it shouldn't be this hard. Like it shouldn't like we every single person who's listening to this podcast who has a twinkle or a tinge of like I'd like to run for something. Like they should be able to. Like we need
Mhm.
whole generations of a new public servants, right? From in elected office, but also in like all of these other public service fields and like we're the system is making it too hard and it needs to it's our job and we can fix it and we can make these systems work better for people and that's the whole dang point.
Mhm. Exactly. I share your frustration, my friend. And, again, I want to say thank you for, bringing your whole badassery to this because and I'm going to start using that because I need to, I need to hype some people up. I feel like people need the energy that you're bringing to this. And I think your constituents, whenever you are elected to Congress, I feel it with every ounce of my being that there's no physical way that you won't be. Um, whenever you were recommended to me, I was like, okay, another California Democrat. And what I mean by that is whenever I think of California, I think of Gavin Newsom. And it's bad because, and it's not even like,
LOL.
I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this because that's not a really bad, but it's like, I, he's thrown trans people under the bus numerous freaking times. Okay.
Yeah. No,
And I
he's
do
the
not
worst.
want to see him in the White House. I cannot vision it. I will be moving to Canada. No, I'm joking, but it's just, well, kind of, but
No, he's the epitome of establishment bought and paid for corporate Democrat politician who also uses too much hair product. Like there's just like bless him's heart. I earned more votes than Gavin Newsom in 28, like, or in whatever race I was running in my part of the world when he was at the top of the ticket. Like, like, Lord have mercy. That's a whole nother tangent that we could go down. But, yeah. What is going to happen? Let's do hot takes for the 2028 presidential election. What do you think is going to happen? What's the kind, not the leader that we need, but the kind of leader? Who should we be looking for? Who should we be cultivating?
I think it's a combination of somebody like Ro Khanna
Hmm.
and Cori Bush. That's
Hmm.
obviously what I want to see. Like,
Hmm.
an anti-genocidal government,
Yep.
a anti-poverty government that's built on and built from the working class, just like
Yep.
every social service in this country, just like every movement. The civil rights movement taught us a lot. The Stonewall uprising with the
Yep.
LGBTQ plus community in New York City with the Stonewall Inn and Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera. So honestly, what I want to see in my lifetime, and I probably won't see it in my lifetime, but what I would love to see is a combination of people like Marsha P. Johnson, Ro Khanna, Cori Bush, um, Summer Lee out of Pennsylvania, which I hope to God she runs for U.S. Senate and knocks John Fetterman the fuck out. Um, but I think we just need somebody who understands the working class. We need
Yeah.
somebody who understands that genocide is genocide. We need to stop bailing out Israel. We need to take care of our country. And we also need to take care of our veterans. Our veterans are left out of the conversation. I'm not just saying that because my grandfather was an Air Force veteran. I'm saying that because genuinely I give a damn about them. The VA is beyond corrupted. My
Mhm.
grandfather refused to get health care at the VA because he felt like he was not appreciated. And
Mhm.
he felt, and that's not the same for every VA, just the one here in Kansas City. They have been known to drop the ball. Veterans are dying by suicide at very high rates in the country. And I think we need to protect the most vulnerable. Trans kids deserve to feel safe. They deserve to be who they want to be. We need to ban guns and not books.
Yeah.
It's so, Audrey, I know you understand this, but I think we definitely need somebody like Cori Bush. We need somebody like Ro Khanna, and I don't just say that because we collaborate with both of them, and I love Ro Khanna, but um, even he still messes up. But he also knows that he messes up, and he corrects those mistakes. So I think it's about accountability, it's about the leadership, and it's about ensuring that people just understand what's going on in the country. We need bold leadership. We need to get money out of politics. We need to overturn Citizens United. And we need people like you in Congress we need you in the people's house because it really is the people's house. And Congress has the power of the purse. Everything that they are doing or not doing is a policy choice. And
Mhm.
the inaction, complicity and silence, it equals compliance. Whenever you comply, you're saying that you do not give a single fuck about your constituents. You are supposed to put your constituents first because whatever you do in your district, Audrey, is going to trickle down to every other district across the country. What you
Mhm.
do in Congress is going to impact the entire country. And I will be the first that will be calling your office like, Audrey,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
the hell did you just
Yeah.
vote on?
Yeah. And that's what we need, right? And then we need members of Congress who are responsive to that, right? The new district I've mapped out, there's 9 counties. It's like 26,000 square miles. Like it's a big chunk of land. But and members of Congress are famously in session like 30 weeks a year. But like you come back and forth, right? And so every weekend I'll be back in my district. Like 22 weeks of the year I'll be in my district. And so making sure that every quarter at least physically in every single one of my counties and in relationship with people and in town halls and in coffee shops and in meet and greets where we can be like where I can be in positions, forcibly put myself in positions to explain every single vote that I take, right? Because there is there are plenty of multi-benefit solutions, but there are no choices that I'm going to make that are going to make every single person happy, right? So being able to be in a relationship and say, hey, this is how I voted, this is why I voted, and then being able to get feedback and be like, okay, there was a negative externality that we didn't plan about because of this vote. Like, how do we correct that? Like, how did this actually get us closer um, to the goals that we're shooting for of making sure, every single person has a roof over their head, has food on their table, has an opportunity to earn a living, and the ability to go to a doctor, right? Like whatever the freaking basic human rights things that are that we are shooting for, like that, like to be in a relationship and have those conversations is key to for me for leadership and what leadership should look like. And that's who I want to be. And we there's a thing that we learn about in working in I work with food banks a lot, and there's a thing that we learn that we talk about in food insecurity work where it's the people who are the closest to the issue most of the
Have the
time
best
best
solutions.
solutions, right, like and so like actually having task forces of people that have lived experience that have are subject matter experts in all of these different issues, whether it's rural health or wildfire insurance or forest and ecological health, like whatever these issues are, having um, people who are meeting regularly, working through these issues, helping find legislative fixes, helping move the needle forward on these conversations, I think is another part of my vision for how I want to lead in this kind of accessible, transparent, collaborative way that I think is the hallmark of millennial women's leadership, right? Which is like who like I am I'm right in the pocket of this is what a millennial woman leader looks like. Here's how I want to show up. And there's a handful of us in Congress, but we need a whole lot more.
Mhm. Mhm. With that, I know we're at time, but again, I want to say thank you for everything that you are doing. And, please do not be a stranger. Continue, you know, reaching out. And, I am here anytime. I'm here to uplift you and support the work that you are doing. And again, once you are elected, you will get a phone call from me if I, and I'll be the first to say it. if you fuck up, I will be calling you. I'm not saying you're going to, because everybody does it. It does happen. But I believe that even if you do, you will be the one to say, well, yeah, you know what? I did fuck up and I'm going to
Yeah,
fix
let's
it.
fix it. Here's how we fix it, right? And like, yeah, that's awesome. And I'm so grateful for this chance to just to get to visit with you and get to know you. And the camaraderie is real, my friend. Holy moly. Can't wait to actually meet you in person one of these days. This has been too fun.
Absolutely. Take it easy, okay?
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.